begin the official recording for today's presentation.
John, why don't you wait about a minute? So
Sure.
as I see people are coming in.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, because you know, when they say 12, they're going to be later.
Aha, there we are.
I was told when I moved here, and I hope this isn't insulting to everyone, but I was told when I moved here that the time in the Pacific Northwest is a little different than East Coast time, in that when you say something starts, that's when you actually pop in or sometimes even leave your house. So I love the laid back. I love the Pacific Northwest laid back attitude, having come from New York and New Jersey, where everybody is frantic. So I love this.
Could this be B. Geller?
But
Could this be B. Geller?
Oh, that was Bev. Sorry.
Okay, sorry.
We have people coming in now, so let's give it a couple of minutes before we start.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
I love, you know what I love about the screen that's up right now? It's like we're talking about time before there was print, and yet we are with the library, and so we have to have the print. It's great. The end, the beginning.
I agree.
It's like the newspaper things. It's great. You can't see words. You can only hear them unless they're written down.
Oral histories.
Mm. I love that.
And I'm going to discontinue my share for a moment.
Yep. John, are we going to, and we'll begin in a minute, are we going to just have Claire visible first as a panelist?
That is solely dependent on a person's settings on their end. They could choose speaker view, they could choose gallery view.
Okay.
And the gallery view will include all of the people who are currently panelists, and that includes Nicola, myself, Kareem, Claire, Spencer, and you.
I'm in speaker view and I can see everyone. Yep.
Oh, great.
Okay.
I think maybe we can start.
All right. Welcome everyone to Tacoma Public Libraries and Tacoma Sister Cities presentation of origin stories from Tacoma's sister cities around the world. My name's John Hargis, and I am the digital media instructor here at Tacoma Public Library, and it's my pleasure to kick off today's webinar. I'm going to start off by just explaining a little bit about this format that we're using today. This is the Zoom webinar format, which is a little bit different. If you've done Zoom meetings in the past, you're going to notice a few distinct differences between Zoom meetings and Zoom webinar. In a Zoom webinar, most of our participants participate as attendees, which means you can see me, you can hear me, you can see and hear the panelists, but your voices are muted by default. It doesn't mean you can't get questions to us, however. If you hover your mouse towards the bottom of your screen, you should see a little icon that says Q&A, and that is your way of reaching us and asking questions as this program unfolds today. We have some amazing programming to share with you. I want to acknowledge Spencer Bowman. He's one of the panelists today for his editing prowess and for serving as such a great partner with me here at Tacoma Library to help create the edits that make these programs possible. But the lion's share of the work is our panelists who have found stories from all over the world, very compelling stories to share today. I also want to thank Beverly Chalkov-Devlin. She is here as a panelist as well, and she is the one who has forged ahead our partnership to make today's webinar possible. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Claire to introduce herself and to kick off the program. So have at it, Claire.
Claire, you rock.
John, thank you so much, and welcome to everyone who is here today. We at Sister Cities, we have been part of Tacoma since 1959. We've celebrated over 60 years with now about 15 Sister Cities. So for those of you who are not familiar with Sister Cities, it started back in 1956 under the leadership of President Eisenhower, who at the end of World War II wanted to create what he called citizen diplomacy. He believed that if we knew one another, if our children knew each other, if we understood better the customs, the habits, the beliefs of cultures all around the world, it would be far less likely for us to go to war against one another. So Sister Cities has an army, if you will, of citizen diplomats. Over 500 cities in the United States are connected with 2,000 cities throughout the world. And Tacoma is a proud member and an early member of that Sister Cities organization. Now, because of that, and because of this idea that we could share with you origin stories from our sister countries, that's the reason that we're here today. And we are thrilled to be here. As they said in the beginning, origin stories take place even before the once upon a time of fairy tales. They reflect the wonder and the glory of the origins of the universe, of God or gods, of our world, and how humankind has learned to live on the earth. Today, we're excited because we have stories from Japan, from the Slavic world, which in our sister city lineup includes not only Russia, but also Ukraine and also Croatia. We also will have a story from the Norse gods, and so that of course includes Scandinavia, but our sister city in Norway, and a story that comes from Stari Grad based on its colonization by the Greeks in the 4th century BC. So let us begin. The first sister city in Tacoma started in 1959 was with Kitakyushu, Japan. So Kitakyushu comes first today. You are going to be thrilled because you are going to meet the chairman of our Sister City Committee of Kitakyushu and his family as they introduce to us a wonderful story called Tanabata Sama. So if we could, let us start with the first story.
Hi everybody, we're the Allens. My name is Walter, and this is...
I'm Inami. I'm Momoko. And I'm Hitomi.
And today we'd like to share some short stories with you about the Japanese summer festival called Tanabata. It is a festival that, for those that are familiar, you'll see these wishes on pieces of paper streaming and hanging from bamboo trees all throughout Japan. It's a festival that's held on July 7th every summer, and today we'd like to tell you how that festival and holiday came to be. It involves the celestial field and the Milky Way and the star Vega, and without giving too much more of the story away, we'll go ahead and read it to you now. My wife Hitomi will present it in Japanese for those Japanese listeners and viewers out there. And I will follow up with the same story in English. So without further ado, Hitomi.
OK。織姫と彦星。夜空にキラキラと輝く天の川。その両側にひときわ大きく輝く2つの星があるのを知っていますか？実はこの2つの星は天に住む人で、夏の夜空の天の川の西にある星を織姫、東にある星を彦星と言います。その昔、天帝の娘織姫はいつも旗を織っていました。織姫が旗で作る布は大層美しく、天上界でも評判でした。天帝は娘が大の自慢でしたが、いつも働いてばかりの娘が不憫で仕方がありません。そこで牛の世話をしている働き者の若者彦星と結婚させることにしました。美しい娘と立派な若者はお似合いでした。お互いに一目で好きになり、喜んで夫婦になったのです。ところがこの2人、お互いのことがあまりにも好きだったので、仕事が手につかなくなりました。2人はいつもおしゃべりしてばかり、織姫は旗を折らず、彦星は牛の世話を全くしなくなったのです。これには天界の人たちも大弱りでした。なぜなら織姫が旗を折らないので服が作れず、天界の人たちはいつもボロボロの格好をしなくてはならなくなったからです。さらには彦星が仕事をしないので牛が働かず、畑からは作物が取れません。天界の人たちはいつもお腹を空かしているようになりました。娘のこととはいえ、これには天帝も怒りました。もうお前たちはあってはならぬ。天帝の命令で織姫は天の川の西に、彦星は天の川の東に住むことになりました。これが織姫と彦星が天の川の両側にいるわけなのです。では2人はその後どうなったのでしょう。実はこれで2人は元のように働き者になるだろうと天界の人たちは一旦は安心したのです。ところが2人は悲しみのあまり全く仕事をしなくなってしまいました。天界の人たちはもうどうすればよいのか分からなくなってしまいました。天界の人たちに相談を受けた天帝はため息をついて2人に言いました。では1年に1度だけ2人が会うことを許そう。その日までは一生懸命働くのだぞ。こうして2人は1年に1度7月7日の七夕の晩、天の川の浅瀬を渡って会えるようになりました。でも雨が降ってしまうと天の川の水が増えて川が渡れなくなってしまいます。そんな時は天帝が使わしたカササギという鳥の群れが飛んできて、翼を重ね合わせて天の川に橋を作ってくれるのだそうです。おしまい。
This is a tale of a long and long ago, when the king of the sky was still busy making stars to hang in the heavens at night. The king had a very beautiful daughter. She was called the Weaving Princess because she sat at her loom all day long every day. She wove the most delicate stuff in the world. It was so light and airy, so thin and smooth, that it was hung among the stars in the sky and draped toward the earth. It was the cloth that we now call the clouds and the fog and the mist. The king of the sky was very proud of his daughter because she could weave so beautifully and was such a help to him. He was very busy making the sky, you see, and needed all the help he could get. But one day, he noticed that the Weaving Princess was becoming pale. "Well, well, my little princess," the king said, "you've been working too hard, I fear. So tomorrow you must take a holiday. Go out and play among the stars all day long. Then please hurry back and help me. I still need much more mist and fog and many more clouds." The princess was very happy to have a holiday. She'd always wanted to go and wade in the stream called the Milky Way that flowed through the sky, but she never had time before. She put on her prettiest clothes and ran out among the stars, right over to the Milky Way. And there, in the middle of the stream, she saw a handsome boy washing a cow in the water. "Hello," the boy said to the princess. "Who are you?" "I'm the Star Vega," she answered, "but everyone calls me Weaving Princess." "I'm the Star Altair," said the boy, "but everyone calls me Herd Boy, because I tend to the cows that belong to the king of the sky. I live over there on the other side of the Milky Way. Won't you come over to my house and play with me?" So the herd boy put the princess on the back of the cow and led her across the stream to his house. They played all sorts of wonderful games and had so much fun that the princess forgot all about going home to help her father. The king of the sky became very worried when the princess failed to come home. He sent a magpie as his messenger to find her and tell her to come home. But when the magpie spoke to the princess, she was having such fun that she would not even listen. Finally, the king had to go himself and bring the princess home. "You've been a very bad girl," the king said. "Just look at the sky, not even finished yet. You've been away and the sky needs clouds and mist and fog. So you can not have another holiday. You must stay here and weave all the time." Then the king poured more and more star water into the Milky Way, until now it had been a shallow stream that you could wade across. But the king poured in so much water from the stars that it became a deep, deep river. The princess and the herd boy lived on opposite sides of the river. So now there was no way they could get across to each other. So the princess went into her little house in the sky and sat in front of her loom. But she was so lonely and longed so much for her herd boy that she couldn't weave at all. Instead, she sat there weeping all the time. And the sky became emptier and emptier, with no clouds and no mist and no fog. Finally, the king said, "Please, my little princess, you mustn't cry all the time. I really need clouds and fog and mist for my sky. I tell you what I'll do. If you'll weave again and work hard, I'll let you go and play with the herd boy one day each year." The princess was so happy when she heard this that she went right to work, and she's been working very hard ever since. But once each year, on the 7th night of the 7th month, the king of the sky keeps his promise to the weaving princess. He sends a flock of magpies to the Milky Way, and with their wings, they make a bridge across the deep river. Then the princess goes running across the bridge of magpies to where the herd boys is waiting for her. And they have a wonderful, fun playing together for one whole night, one whole day. And that's the reason why Japanese children celebrate a holiday called Tanabata-sama, the 7th night of the 7th month. Children everywhere love to play, and it makes them happy to know that the princess and the herd boy stars are having such fun together up there in the sky. So the children on earth decorate bamboo branches everywhere with bright pieces of colored paper and wave them in the sky to remind the king of the sky that it's time for him to keep his promise again. Well, I hope you enjoyed that story. I thank you all for watching and listening. For those at home watching, we will share some pictures of photos of our two daughters, Nanami and Momoko, in Japan during this July 7th summer festival. And the holiday photos are fun. You can see the pieces of brightly colored paper hanging from bamboo trees and from the entrances of the local shrine there. Again, with that, I thank you for watching. Say bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
That was wonderful. That was truly, truly wonderful. So thank you, Walter, Hitomi, your two wonderful daughters. You gave me a sense that whenever I look at the sky again, I will realize that Princess was weaving her very light touch, weaving the fog, weaving the nighttime. And that's a beautiful thought. Are there any questions or comments from those of you who have been listening to the story that you would like to just open up and say at this time?
We have a question in the question and answer field, and it says, what do people write on the papers that they hang?
Is anybody on the panel, have you ever been in Japan for this particular
No.
holiday?
Hello?
I am going to make a guess because usually when you write a special message on the paper, it's usually a wish for something that you want deep in your heart, truly. And you
Hello?
put the tree.
Yep.
Nikki?
And Joan wrote, what a beautiful story. I loved it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I recording? No, mute.
Yes.
Am I recording?
Yes.
Hello? Well, my dad went to Kitakyushu as our first sister city as he was mayor of Tacoma. And I want to know about Walter because he was reading this story, but what about his heritage? And what a beautiful story. I want all of the stories for everyone.
Thank you, Nikki. Walter and his family were not able to be here on the panel today. So that's why we have the story recorded and sent to us. But we'll get that story from him the next time. I hope we can do this again.
Claire, you are a visionary. Okay, we love this project.
That's great. That's great. Well, maybe now we can go to another part of the world. I think most of our guests all know where Japan is, and it is that amazing empire in the Pacific Ocean. But now we are going to a landmass. The next story that we have is actually our Slavic creation story or origin story. So for sister cities, we actually have 3 sister cities that are included in the Slavic world. The Russian sister city that we have is Vladivostok in the Russian Far East. Our newest sister city, not our newest, but one of our very new sister cities from 2017 is in Ukraine, and that city is Brovary. And the third city, which has many Slavic parts, here is our map. So for those of you looking for Vladivostok on the right side, actually not too far from Kitakyushu, and then cross Russia and you'll come to Brovary. And then if you look a little bit more westward, you'll see Stari Grad, Croatia. So many of the peoples that live in Croatia also are from a Slavic background. So this story, I want to introduce to you the other person who unfortunately cannot be on the panel today. Her name is Vera Rusev, and Vera worked with Tacoma Sister Cities this summer as a student intern. She's done some wonderful work interviewing teachers in the Tacoma School District and finding out from them more about the history of Tacoma Sister Cities and educational exchanges that we have had throughout the world, and that where we have also had students coming to Tacoma from countries all over the world. So let us move to the story. Let us move to hear Vera. Vera's background is that she is Bulgarian, and so she tells this story with her own background and her own Slavic history. So thank you. Let's begin, Vera.
Hi, my name is Vera, and I'll be reading the first chapter from Songs of the Bird Gamayun by Dmitry Kushnir. The first chapter from the book Songs of the Bird Gamayun describes the creation of the world and the birth of the Slavic faith's main deities. Gamayun, the storyteller, describes the god Rod, who created the oceans and the heavens. He also created the earth, but it was a small earth that sank into the vast ocean. The gods Lada and Svarog were also born from Rod. It was Svarog who pulled the earth out of the ocean and molded it into the earth we have today. Chapter 1. One Bog Rod, how Rod created Svarog, Lada, earth, and Yusha serpent. The weather picked up, the thundering cloud was approaching. The oak started to rustle and bend, the feather grass raised up in the fields. That is Gamayun flying, the prophetic bird. From the side of the east, raising the storm with her wings, flew from beyond the tall mountains, flew from beyond the dark forests, flew from the underbelly of that thundering cloud. She flew over the blue sea, she flew over the Sarachin's field. Just as by the fast river Smarodina, just as by the white-hot Alatir stone, in the green garden on the apple tree, Gamayun bird sat down. As she sat down, she began to sing songs. She stretched her feathers and touched raw earth. Just by that Alatir stone came and gathered 40 tsars with tsareviches, 40 knyaz with knyazeviches, 40 mighty warriors, 40 wise magi. Came and gathered, sat down in rows circling her, and began to ask the bird maiden, the prophetic bird, the wise bird, you know much, you wit much. You tell us, Gamayun, you sing tell us, how the world became light, how our red sun came to be. Light crescent and many stars, how tell us were born, how the strong winds came to be, how the clear dawns began to shine. I will not keep from you what I know. Before the birth of the white light, the world was engulfed in darkness. Only Rot was in darkness, our ancestor. Rot, the source of the universe and father of Bagi. In the beginning, Rot was confined within an egg. He was the ungerminated seed. He was the unopened pod. But came an end to his imprisonment. Rot gave birth to love, Mother Lada. Rot broke his prison with the power of love, and the world became full of love. Long has Rot tormented, long has he heaved, and gave birth he to domain of heaven, and below it was the under heaven created. The navel cord was cut by the rainbow. He has separated the ocean, the blue sea, from the heavenly water with the stone firmament. In the heavens he created 3 concaves, separated light and darkness, truth and falsehood. Rot then gave birth to Mother Earth, and fell Earth into the dark abyss, into the ocean she disappeared. Then Sun came out of his face, from the heavenly Rot, the great ancestor and the father of Bagi. The light crescent from his chest, from the heavenly Rot, the great ancestor and the father of Bagi. The frequent stars from his eyes, from the heavenly Rot, the great ancestor and the father of Bagi. The bright dawns from his eyebrows, from the heavenly Rot, the great ancestor and the father of Bagi. The dark nights from his thoughts, from the heavenly Rot, the great ancestor and the father of Bagi. The strong winds from his breath, from the heavenly Rot, the great ancestor and the father of Bagi. The rain, the snow, and the hail from his tears, from the heavenly Rot, the great ancestor and the father of Bagi. The thunder and lightning came from his voice, from the heavenly Rot, the great ancestor and the father of Bagi, who were born of Rot for love, the heavens and all of under heavens. He, the father of Bagi, he is also the mother of Bagi. He, born of himself, and will be born again. Rot, all of the Bagi, and all of the under heavens. He, what was, and that what will be. What was born, and that what will be born. Rot gave birth to heavenly Svarog, and breathed into him own powerful spirit. gave him 4 heads, so he would watch the world in all directions, so nothing could hide from him, so he would see all in under heavens. Svarog started to lay the path for sun along the blue heavenly concave, so the day's stallions could race through the skies, so the morning would be followed by the day, and the day would be relieved by the night. Svarog began to walk the skies, began to look over his domain. He sees sun is rolling along the skies. He sees the light crescent and the stars, and below him the ocean is spreading and surges foaming with foam. Took a look, he, at his domain, did not see only Mother Earth. Where is Mother Earth? Grieved he. Here he noticed a tiny dot in the ocean sea blackens. It's not a dot in the sea blackens, it's a gray duck swimming, born of the gray foam, swims in the sea as if needle spins, not sitting in one place, not standing still, leaping around and spinning. Do you know not where Earth lies? Svarog began to ask the gray duck. Earth is below me, said she. Deep in the ocean she's hidden. By the will of heavenly Rot, by the want wish of Svarog, get Earth from the abyss. Nothing, said the duck. Into the ocean sea she dove. The whole year was gone in the abyss. As the year passed, ascended the duck from the abyss. Did not have enough breath, just slightly, did not reach Earth just a little bit. If I only swam a hair farther. Help us, Rot, Svarog cried out. Strong winds then rose up the blue sea. Rot gave birth to the duck through the wind, and said, breath to the duck through the wind, and said Svarog to the grey duck, by the will of heavenly Rot, by the want wish of Svarog, bring Earth from the sea abyss. Nothing, said the duck. Into the ocean sea she dove, and 2 years was gone in the abyss. As the time passed, ascended from the abyss. Did not have enough breath, just slightly, did not reach Earth just a little bit. If only I swam half a hair farther. Help me, Father, cried out Svarog. Strong winds then rose. Thunderclouds covered the skies. The great storm began. The voice of Rot, thunder, shook the heavens, and the duck was struck by lightning. Rot breathed in the great strength through the great storm into the grey duck. And Svarog willed the grey duck, by the will of heavenly Rot, by the want wish of Svarog, bring Earth from the sea abyss. Nothing, said the duck. Into the ocean sea she dove, and 3 years was gone in the abyss. As the time passed, ascended from the abyss. In her beak a handful of earth she brought. Svarog took the handful of earth, began to crush in his hands. Warm it, red sun, light it, light crescent. Help me, the strong winds. We will mold from this raw earth, Mother Earth, the nurturing mother. Help us, Rot, Lada, help. Svarog crushes earth. The sun warms, crescent lights, the winds blow. The winds blew earth of the palms, and she fell into the blue sea. She was warmed by red sun. Raw earth became covered by crust. Light crescent then cooled it. Thus was Mother Earth created by Svarog. In her, he established 3 underground concaves, 3 underground domains of Pequot. And so Earth would not sink again into the sea. Rot gave birth and placed powerful Yusha under her. Serpent the marvelous, the strong many times over. Heavy is his fate. He is to hold many thousands of years, Mother Earth. This is how Mother Raw Earth was born. This is how she settled upon the serpent, and if Yusha serpent moves, Mother Raw Earth turns. Thank you.
Whoa. Thank you, Vera. You get the sense from that creation story about how much work it is to create our universe. 3 times they dove into the ocean, longer and longer each time until the world would come forth. Well, our Slavic brothers and sisters know about work, and certainly I think our sister city relationships in the Slavic world have been really unique and amazing ones. Our sister city relationship began in Vladivostok right at the beginning of Perestroika, and our sister city relationship in Brovary has been honored this year for receiving the Humanitarian Award from Sister Cities International. The people of Tacoma purchased a used ambulance from the Tacoma Fire Department and managed to ship it all the way to Germany, where we had people from the Tacoma Fire Department and the Sister Cities meet the ship and drive the ambulance about 24 hours into Ukraine, where it was a gift to the fire department from Brovary. It has had a remarkable impact for the people of Brovary who did not have an ambulance before and only were able to get to the hospital often with their neighbors' cars and with the single ambulance from the city. It's been a great gift, and the federal government of Ukraine paid attention to the fact that Tacoma had gifted Brovary, and they have decided to give to Brovary a new fire truck. So it's amazing what Sister City activities can do in the communities where we live and work and come to know people. Were there any comments or questions about folks in regards to the Bird of Gamayan or the Slavic story?
We do have a question, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name, but I think it's Han Hui. Interesting, these stories are often nature related. I like the sound effects in this story.
Thank you, Spencer, for those amazing sound effects.
And then Joan James, what a beautiful story. I loved it. Thank you. We have another one from Han. That was a neat and useful donation and gift.
Oh, yes, it was great. Well, let's go across the world again a little bit farther towards us, and let us now go to Ålesund, Norway. To that take a look on the map there of the way those fingers of the Scandinavian world come down into the ocean. It's always struck me as an interesting geographic design. We are so excited to have Nicola Tollefson read this story, because as she said, her dad was mayor in the days when Ålesund was just formed, which was back in the 80s. Sorry?
No, he didn't know about Ålesund. He was Kitty Kyushu, big.
In the beginning, yes. But Ålesund was later. What's the funny story in Tacoma is that when the Tacoma mayor, I think it was John Anderson at the time that Sister Cities began, where they found out that we were going to have Sister Cities, the first Sister City that they wanted to have was in Norway. But the plan was that the Japanese would have the first Sister City. And then it took a few years for the Ålesund Sister City to actually begin. But they have made up for it in many amazing activities that they have done.
Did not know. You got
Nikki,
it, girl.
So Nikki, please welcome with the story of the gods.
This is one rendition of Norse gods' creation myth, retold and illustrated by Johan Egerkrantz. The creation. Ginnungagap. In the beginning, before the world existed, before men and before the gods themselves, there was only fire, ice, and nothingness. To the south lay blazing Muspelheim, the realm of heat, light, and chaos. To the north, shrouded in mist, lay Niflheim, the realm of darkness and eternal cold. Between them stretched the bottomless void of Ginnungagap. In the heart of Niflheim was the spring Hvergelmir, the source of 11 rivers that poured noxious and steaming into the yawning void. Mist from the cold water turned to thick hoarfrost, and over time, a glacier formed on the side of Ginnungagap that faced the icy realm. At the same time, heat and sparks streamed from the Muspelheim, and where the water and ice met in the middle, the first life was born out of the melting waters. It was in the form of the monstrous giant of giants, Ymir. As the giant slowly came to life, another figure appeared from the mist, the cow Audhumla. From her udders ran 4 rivers of milk. Ymir gorged himself on the nourishing milk and fell asleep. And while he slept, he sweated profusely. The result was extraordinary. From out of his damp, dark armpit grew a man and a woman, while at the same time his legs fathered a grotesque, 6-headed son. From these weird creatures all giants are descended. These malicious monsters soon began spreading out into the young cosmos. Audhumla, the cow, fed off the salty blocks of ice trapped in the glacier. As she licked, a man came out of the ice. On the first day, only his hair could be seen. By the second day, his head was revealed. And on the third day, the whole man appeared, strong and magnificent. The man's name was Bura. He had a son called Bor. Bor married Bestla, a giantess, and she gave birth to 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. They were the first gods. Bor's sons create the world. The giants and gods that were descended from these original beings hated each other, and when Odin, Vili, and Ve grew up, they decided to kill Ymir. They were determined to put an end to the dominion of the giants and bring order to the universe. Following a violent clash which shook the very foundations of creation, they succeeded in killing the hideous giant. The fountains of blood that spurted from his body became a river that drowned all the other giants, apart from one. His name was Bergelmir. He and his family rode the gushing waves in a hollow log, and Bergelmir later became forefather of the giants known as Rimtursar, or frost giants. Bor's sons dragged Ymir's remains to the middle of Ginnungagap. Under Odin's direction, they began methodically cutting up his body, using the pieces to form the earth. His flesh became soil. His unbroken bones became mountains, and his teeth and shattered bones were used to make rocks and gravel. They made trees for the forests from his hair, and his beard became the grass. His blood was used for lakes and for the mighty ocean that girdles the earth. The heavenly firmament was made from Ymir's skull, and at each of the 4 corners they set a dwarf to hold it up. These 4 dwarfs were given the names East, West, North, and South. Then they flung his brain into the heavens, and that is how clouds were formed. The earth was a round ball, and encircling it was the deep ocean. One day, when Odin and his brothers were walking along the edge of the ocean, they found 2 tree trunks that had washed ashore. They liked the look of these dead but beautiful trees, and from them they made the first humans. Odin breathed the spirit of life into them. Vili gave them consciousness, and Ve gave them speech, hearing, and sight. They also gave them clothes and names. The man was called Ash, and the woman Embla, or elm. From these two, the human race is descended. The gods realized that their creations needed somewhere to live. Inland, they built a wall from Ymir's eyebrows. They named the wall and the land behind it Midgard, and that became the people's home. The land running along the ocean's eastern edge outside the wall was given to the remaining giants, and their country was called Jotunheim. When the gods split open Ymir's corpse, they found it was crawling with maggots. They decided to give these maggots a new form. Half of them became the ugly but skillful craftsman dwarves, known also as Dökkvalkar, the Dark Elves. They settled in the part of the underworld called Svartalheim. The other half became the wise and beautiful Ljósafar, or Light Elves, and they were permitted to live near the gods in the heavenly Alfheim. The Dark Elves and the Light Elves were an altogether different kind of being, neither god nor human, but something in between. Then the gods took the sparks and glowing embers from Muspelheim and put them high in the heavens to illuminate the world. That was how the stars, the sun, and the moon were created. To give order to time, some heavenly bodies were appointed fixed paths to follow. Night, a beautiful giantess with raven-black hair, was given the task of traveling in a chariot across the sky during the dark part of the day. The chariot was drawn by the stallion Hrimfaxi. Foam dropping from the horse bit is the dew that falls over the earth. Day is night's sun, and his horse, Skinfaxi, lights up heaven and earth with its gleaming mane. The mighty eagle Haraldvelgr was placed in the edge of the heavens, creating wind by flapping its fast wings. Responsibility for the changing seasons was shared equally between winter and summer. The former was a stern and villainous descendant of the cruel frost giants, and the other a gentle, kindly deity. Humankind, the descendants of Ask and Embla, began to disperse over the earth. One man, Mundilfari, had 2 children, and they were so beautiful that he called his daughter Sun and his son Moon. The gods were angered by his pride, so they took the children from him, putting them in the sky to look after the heavenly bodies, whose names they had been given. Sun was made to steer the chariot that pulled the sun across the sky, and Moon supervised the passage of the moon. Sun and moon travel fast because they are constantly chased by 2 giants in the shape of wolves, Skoll and Hati, who are trying to swallow them. Sometimes the wolves catch up with them, and then you can see how the sun and moon slowly appear into their jaws. But they always manage to escape. We call that eclipse of the sun or the moon. When the end of the world comes, sun and moon will finally be swallowed up by their pursuers.
Oh. Again, congratulations. What an amazing story. Are you who are listening in, are you beginning to see some similarities? Are you beginning to hear where the cow is and remember the herd boy in Japan? Are you thinking of the Slavic stories and how it relates slightly to our Norse gods? Nicola, that was superb. Those are wonderful stories. I saw one of the questions was, what were you reading from? I hope our questioner got the answer at the end of your story. And were there any other questions, Beverly?
So I can, yes, so what we can do is we will email out the references for people after the presentation. So we have all of your email addresses, and we will go back and for any specific questions, we'll email you the references for the stories. And then Virginia made a comment, what a graphic story. Han had asked, Han had a comment that said, Norse stories are more than just what we see in superhero movies. And then Joan was referring to the previous story. Interesting that a duck brought up the first story. So we missed that during the previous story from Vera. But yes, Norse stories are more than just what we see in superhero movies. And we can post the reference that was on the slide, and we will also email it after the presentation.
Well, I would say there was a part of that story that really struck me. I have always wondered when we hear our evolution stories about how we, as a people, we came from the Ngorongoro Gorge in Africa, and what they say, and we walked out of that area and peopled the rest of the universe. But coming from a boat building family, I've often wondered, and you said it in the Norse God story, that they jumped on the log and they rode the waves on those logs. I think that must be the way that many peoples moved around our universe, by capturing the log that floated so that they could get from one place to another. That's just an idea. Nobody's proven me right at all. So let's go on, because you begin to see these influences, and this is what's exciting. Our next story is from Starigrad, and if you see the location there, you'll notice that it is on the Adriatic Sea, and it's located not far from Rome in Italy and not far from Greece. So our storyteller today is a descendant of one of the families from Starigrad, and I think we'll introduce her. Molly Graham is her name, and she is going to tell us the story and how she came to tell it.
More than 2,400 years ago, the Ionian Greeks sailed their ships from Pharos in the Aegean Sea to an island they named Pharos in the Adriatic Sea. The year was 385 BCE. They settled at the end of a long bay and named their town Starigrad. In English, Starigrad means Old Town. My great-grandfather was born in 1880 in Starigrad in the Adriatic, and then lived 80 years in Old Town Tacoma with other immigrants from the country now called Croatia. Before the Greeks on Pharos, there were the Illyrians and the indigenous people known as the Dalmatae. Today, the area is called the Dalmatian Coast. The hills were rocky, and the work was hard, but surely the Dalmatae had their own stories of the creation of the world. Sadly, though, they did not have a written language. So today, we will tell you the stories of creation that have come down to us from the stories the Greeks told when they gathered together after a long day working in the fields, planting vineyards and other crops in Starigrad. Are you ready? In the beginning, not a lot was going on, and when I say not a lot, I mean nothing. Just a gaping void named Chaos. So Chaos was just hanging out by himself when, suddenly, from out of Chaos came the first primordial gods. We're talking Uranus, the sky, Pontus, the sea, Tartarus, the pit of the underworld, Nyx, the night, Hemera, the day, and so on. But the most important being birthed from Chaos, the head honcho of the primordial gods, if you will, had to be Gaia, the earth. Gaia had a little bit of a thing for Uranus, and Uranus had always admired Gaia gazing down at her from above, and eventually the two of them fell in love. The earth and the sky. How sweet. And it was great for a while. They were in love, things were awesome, they had 12 adorable children called the Titans. But then Gaia got pregnant again, and she bore 3 children, each with only one eye in the center of his head. Uranus was so horrified that he took his sons, the Cyclops, and threw them into the depths of Tartarus. Now, Gaia was pissed off about this, as anyone would be, but she bided her time, waiting for revenge. She and Uranus had another set of children, but unfortunately for them, Uranus was a horrible dad and threw them into Tartarus along with their brothers, the Cyclops, just because they each had 100 arms and 50 heads. That was the perfect time for Gaia's revenge. She went to her children, the Titans, and asked them for assistance in cutting up Uranus into teeny tiny pieces. At first they were skeptical about committing patricide, but eventually the youngest, Kronos, stepped forward and swore to do the deed. With the help of his brothers, Kronos tricked his father and killed Uranus with his sieve. Yay! I guess. I mean, I'm personally against chopping my dad up, but hey, I don't have a dad like Uranus. Anyway, after that, Kronos became king of the Titans, or some fancy title like that, and split up the world among his siblings to rule. Kronos got married to his sister Rhea. They had different rules back at the inception of time, and lived happily ever after. Just kidding. Before Uranus died, he cursed Kronos, saying that his children would destroy him as he had destroyed Uranus. Yeah, so that really helped Kronos' mental state as he was running the universe. He got super paranoid, and when he finally had a kid, he was like, you know what? I'm just gonna avoid this whole destroying business and swallow her whole. I'm a genius. He had 4 more kids, and each of them went down the hatch until Rhea was like, I've had enough. And she hid the 6th baby, little Zeus, away on an island and gave Kronos a rock to swallow instead. And then I'm sure you can imagine little Zeus grew up and rescued his brothers and sisters by making Kronos vomit them up, and then there was a massive war, and eventually the gods, for Kronos' children were not titans but gods, prevailed, and Kronos was defeated. And that is how we got the world as we know it, with each of the male gods claiming a domain. Zeus claimed the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades the underworld. Now, you may be wondering what humans are doing while all this is happening, like, aren't they all getting trampled? Well, before all this war and vomiting up your kids' business, Kronos had a nephew named Prometheus, who was playing around one day by a river and formed these creatures in the shape of titans out of clay, breathing life into them and letting them roam free. The humans at this point were basically no smarter than animals and just kind of scrabbled around trying to avoid getting smashed by angry gods. After the war, Zeus didn't really care about humans, but Prometheus, who had fought on his side during the war, was like, hey, maybe could we, give them some fire so they can, stay warm at night? And Zeus was like, nah. So Prometheus took the matter into his own hands and sneaked into Olympus, stole some fire, and gave it to the humans. And thanks to him and his fire of life, we developed into more complex creatures who could think for ourselves. And even though Zeus chained up Prometheus to a rock and had an eagle eat out his liver every day, Prometheus did a noble thing. So there you go. Crash course on the creation of the world as we know it through the eyes of the Greeks. In summary, the universe began with a dysfunctional family working through their problems, and it's thanks to them that the world is the way it is. Thank you for listening.
Well, Molly, we thank you for putting that in words that we all totally understand. I hope you all enjoyed it. And I'm not sure if Molly's been able to join us on the panel. She was trying to get in, I think. If she's here, it would be great to talk with her.
Welcome, Molly. She has now been promoted to panelist, and all you need to do is unmute, Molly.
Hello.
Hi, Molly. We loved your story. It was fantastic. There are people who are listening who may have some questions or comments.
Yeah.
So I will read them, unless you wanted to unmute everyone, John.
Are you saying unmute everyone on the panel, Beverly?
No, the attendees.
That will take some
Can
time to
we-
go down the list and
That's
unmute.
okay. That's okay. I'll just
Can
read
we
the
share
comments.
the screen?
Yep, I'll read the comments. One is Hans says, Molly is a good actor. Donald says, I love the side comments and sarcasm. Molly is a great storyteller, comedian. Mark says, awesome reading, Molly. And then Virginia says, fabulous personable storytelling. Joan says, love that great summary of the story of humans, told with enthusiasm and humor. Well told. I am excited by your enthusiasm. So Molly, if you'd like to respond to any of those or add any comments, that would be wonderful.
Thank you so much. I had a lot of fun doing it. I love these stories, so it was really fun to do.
Let me see if there are any more. Did anyone have any questions for Molly?
Well, I just don't know how to share video.
It's okay. We can hear your voice.
Okay, well, you don't want to be seeing me, but okay. I have to say this is mega fun and what a delight. And I don't give it a name. I call it the covert conundrum. Because it's underground and we know not what is happening today.
Okay.
Well, can I just see people?
The only people that you can see, Nikki, are the panelists in this.
Well,
form.
okay.
And
So-
Molly has an avatar up of, I guess, bunnies.
Okay, well, I just don't know which
Oh,
I
there's
can.
Molly. Now we can see Molly. So
Well, no, because okay.
there's Molly. Yep.
And so, hey, Molly, because you were mega, but I kind of want do across the thing. How can we do the screen thing of all the participants?
Nicola, by design, the webinar format allows us to receive questions from the attendees and to address those questions verbally, but the format itself prevents us from seeing their faces.
I get it. Okay, well, I just love what you do, John Hargis, and you and the library people in Sister Cities and Tacoma Creates have done a wonderful thing for all of us.
Thank you. Yes, we are in.
I got it all down with the 3 peeps down.
Okay, we are in agreement. And I will have to make one comment about Molly's story because I am absolutely thrilled when she made that comment that she doesn't believe in patricide, because if she did, she'd be messing with my son. So Molly.
But Clara, I have something to send your son, but it's about Brazilian music, so I'll be talking to you later.
Okay, great. So Molly, thanks so much for participating in our storytelling from Stary Grad. And for those of us in Old Town Tacoma, which as you mentioned, is the English translation of Stary Grad, we're very, very grateful. So we're making a transition right now, and I do want to point out one thing, because I figure that people who love storytelling probably also love books, and they might like to read. So I wanted to let you know that about a year ago, Tacoma Sister Cities began a global book club rather. And we have been going since August of last year. And I just want those of you who are here to know that in next month, the book that we have coming up is from South Africa, and it is called Evening Primrose by Kopano Matawa. And in October, we will have a Ukrainian book called Your Ad Could Go Here by Oksana Zabushko. So if any of you who are on the call visiting and you're interested in getting in finding out more about the Sister Cities Book Club, we now, in this time, in the pandemic time, we meet together via Zoom, but we always have people from the sister city, and we're reading books from the sister country. And so it is a rousing and interesting conversation that happens once a month about the books that we're reading. So send us your email if you would like to be added to the book Club list. So
I
now,
will be on it, and you are a rock star, Clara.
great,
I am
great.
leaving. I'm leaving the meeting now.
Oh, we're going to miss you. Thank you, Nikki, for everything that you have done to bring us the Norse gods. So our next speaker, our next story is unique, it's unusual, and it's something I am so excited and looking forward to hearing. It's about jazz. So I talked with Kareem. I said, you know, could you do something about the origin, the creation
Oh,
of
sorry, I didn't know that.
this music the music that we all have heard. Now, it's special for Sister Cities.
Oh,
because
sorry, I didn't know.
Kareem himself is a musician, and he has played in our sister city in Taichung, Taiwan. He has played in Beat, France, and he has played not only in Kitakyushu, Japan, but he has also worked with students from Kitakyushu here in Tacoma. So it is my honor and privilege and delight to introduce to you Kareem Candy, who is going to give us stories about the origin of jazz in general, in Tacoma, and in the world and sister cities. Kareem,
Sorry,
welcome.
Claire, I did not know that.
Thank you, Claire. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be here. With the time I have, I'll try and do the best I can to explain some of this stuff and the origin of jazz. And it's a lot, so I'll try and be brief and try and break it down and keep it simple. But just a little background on myself. I've been a resident of Tacoma for 41 years. I grew up learning how to play music here, studied jazz and classical music and all that kind of stuff. Learned how to be a musician in Tacoma. I've taught the jazz program at Pierce College for about 10 years. I've been teaching the jazz program at the Tacoma School of the Arts for about 20 years. This will be my 20th year now. And I'm a musician, a composer, a band leader, educator. And I've been fortunate enough to travel all over the world and work with lots of great musicians from all different backgrounds and walks of life. Even if we don't speak the same language, as soon as we start playing music, we can communicate back and forth with music as a language very, very easily. And that's kind of the unique and powerful thing about music, and not just music, but jazz in general, because jazz is a collaborative dialogue back and forth with notes and rhythms. So that's a little bit about my background. About the history of jazz in Tacoma. So I'm going to break this down in a lot of different ways. I'll talk about the history of jazz in Tacoma, and then jazz as it's traveled the world over since what we know of jazz starting in the early 1900s till now, and then maybe even before that too. So the history of jazz in Tacoma. You know, I was born in 1978, so I wasn't around at the time, but I've heard that Pac Ave in Tacoma actually had quite a well-known live scene, music scene, popular music scene, even more so than Seattle at the time. So you had groups that would come through and they would want to perform here in Tacoma because of the opportunity. So you had folks like Louis Armstrong, you had folks like Billie Holiday, Lester Young and the Count Basie Band. All the folks that were really well-known artists would come to Tacoma and perform. So that part of the history was well known, which I didn't learn till later on in my career. And then also when I was alive, you know, learning how to play, there was a very well-known jazz club in Tacoma by the name of Red Kelly's. Red Kelly started the club originally in Tumwater, and then he relocated to Tacoma later in his life. And that club had been there from quite some time. Red Kelly was a very well-known bassist who had performed with the Woody Herman Orchestra, as well as Red Norvo and Frank Sinatra. And he knew a lot of very well-known musicians around the world from his travels. And so he would bring musicians to come to town and perform in his club. Now, fast forward to when I started learning how to play and get things together in 1997, he was bringing in a lot of great artists. One was my first teacher, a gentleman by the name of Tracy Knope, who was from Tacoma and then had gone to the Berklee School of Music in Boston, which is a very well-known jazz conservatory, and then had gone out on the road with the Tommy Dorsey Band. Now, Tommy Dorsey was a well-known jazz big band leader in the 40s and 50s. And so Tracy didn't play with Tommy Dorsey when he was alive. A lot of those band leaders had died, but the band was still out touring, playing that music. They called them ghost bands. So that was my first teacher, and he taught me, and he would also perform at Red Kelly's. Also, I met a great saxophonist mentor by the name of Bill Ramsey. Bill Ramsey is from this area as well. And I believe he was driving trucks for Nally's in the 60s and 70s, but also working and playing and performing and doing a lot of that stuff. And he had worked with Duke Ellington's orchestra, as well as the Count Basie Orchestra, these very well-known big bands, and actually worked with these folks while they were still alive. So he was a mentor for me as well. And a lot of these guys, you know, you would learn music in school, like band, like most students would take band, but then a lot of it, you know, I heard someone mentioning earlier, you know, oral tradition. A lot of jazz, you know, can't be taught out of a book. It's an oral tradition. You learn from these people's experiences and how they came to do things, because it's like talking. There's not one right or wrong way to talk. So they might have one little piece of information and another musician might have another little piece of information, and you kind of learn that way in conjunction with the stuff you learn in school. And then also, at Red Kelly's, Bill Ramsey was bringing up a great saxophonist from Los Angeles by the name of Pete Chrislieb. Now, Pete Chrislieb's father was a very well-known clarinetist, bassoonist in the MGM orchestras down in Los Angeles. So he did all these movies like Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz and all these things for Walt Disney. And he was very good friends with Igor Stravinsky, classical composer. So Pete Chrislieb grew up around all of this stuff. You know, he's a very, very well-known, one of the best tenor saxophonists still alive to this day. So he was coming up and performing with Bill. And, you know, Pete had spent a whole lifetime of doing studio stuff in Los Angeles. Like he was on the Tonight Show band with Johnny Carson for years. He did a lot of movie recordings and soundtracks for like Star Trek, or a lot of blockbuster films that you've heard of. So he was a studio musician and a very well-known artist who would go out on the road and play with artists like Chet Baker or, you know, Louis Bellson or other Mel Lewis. These great jazz artists. So I was getting to hear, you know, it was like winning the lottery for me as a jazz musician, being able to be around these great minds and learn from them and ask them questions. And at the same time, when I was in high school, there was a musician that moved to Gig Harbor that would perform in Tacoma as well. His name was Ollie Jackson. Ollie is a drummer from Detroit. He came from a musical family. His father was a very well-known bassist, or his uncle, excuse me, by the name of Oliver Jackson, who would do a lot of these Blue Note records and work with great jazz artists on the East Coast. Well, Ollie was the lead drummer for the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra in New York, which is currently one of the best jazz organizations, more modern jazz groups that we have right now currently. And Ollie still to this day plays in Wynton Marsalis's quartet. Wynton is one of the premier jazz artists in the world, arguably. So not only did I have this education, you know, here in Tacoma of all these great, you know, old school minds, but I had access to one of the most cutting edge contemporary jazz minds right now today that we have. So I had lots of very good foundations in jazz education growing up right here in Tacoma. So for me, that's kind of a very, very small window in explaining, you know, jazz history in Tacoma and why that plays a role in what I do, because now as a teacher, I pass on that information to all of my students, not only here in Tacoma where I teach with private lessons in the school programs that I work with, but also when I go to other cities, other countries, I pass that information along as well. And not only that, I learn from all the musicians that I work with, you know, like how did you do that? What are you thinking? Or, you know, what's your conception? So I'm always, you know, jazz it's a living, breathing thing. So that's a small little window into the jazz history of Tacoma. There's a lot going on all the time, but that's a little snapshot that hopefully gives you some context. So I wanted to talk about the origin story of jazz. This is a massive thing. I'm not an ethnomusicologist. I read a lot and I practice a lot and talk to a lot of musicians, and I know enough to know that I don't know a lot, but this is just my opinions and perspective about jazz. So, and this is an oversimplification, but jazz as we know it in 2020 is a blending of Western European harmony and African American rhythms. And again, this is a gross oversimplification, so bear with me. But, you know, artists, even before what we know as jazz became a thing, artists were improvising all over the world. You know, when we talk about improvisation, what we're talking about is, you know, if you compose a song, you write it down, you have time to think about it, you have time to make changes and edits. You know, when you're improvising, you don't. You're doing it on the fly and there's no takebacks. It's like, think about it like composing is like writing a speech. Improvising is like having a conversation with someone. You don't think it through, you just do it in real time. So artists like, you know, Beethoven and Mozart and all these classical composers, they would improvise. They would play their themes and they might embellish them or play them differently from night to night. There came a point in time where someone wrote down a definitive version and that's the one that we all know and love. But they were musicians. They knew rhythm, they knew notes, they knew theory, and they could, you know, play within that context. And it was not just those composers. You had that happening in the Middle East, in Africa, in Asia, all over Europe, and even Native American culture is known to be, you know, involved with that as well. So, so like I said, what we know as jazz, African-American rhythms, Western European harmony, started in New Orleans. But jazz is definitely, to this day, speaking of origins, I mean, it's always reborn. It's always brand new. It's always beginning again, because basically it's a living, breathing language composed of notes and rhythms. And all of those, it's a dialogue between the musicians that are playing it. And each musician is a sum total of their generation, when they were born, their region where they lived, the folk music that they've been exposed to, and the music that they've studied in terms of jazz. You know, there's a huge body of language, at least over 100 years now, of what we know as American jazz. But, you know, if you grew up in Japan versus in Africa versus Mexico versus Canada, the folk music that you've listened to growing up will also be part of your vocabulary. Just like right now I'm talking to you, I'm a sum total of my vocabulary. And when you speak, you're a sum total of your vocabulary. Some people have a Southern accent. Some people speak with, you know, maybe you can tell it's a thick European accent, or maybe they're from, you know, from Alaska, wherever, you know, wherever you're from, that becomes part of you, and that becomes part of your vocabulary when you improvise. So hopefully that makes sense. And if you guys have questions, feel free to ask questions, and I'm happy to clarify. I'll try and leave some time at the end, but I'm trying to condense a lot of information into a short amount of time. So, but that's in a nutshell the basis of jazz. Jazz, to me, any music, if you go to a music store or look it up, anything that has a heavy dose of improvisation in 2020 gets categorized as jazz. So it could be rock, funk, hip hop, you know, world music, whatever it is. If there's a lot of information, it's usually categorized as jazz. So, so what I wanted to do today was kind of talk about how jazz has traveled the world, or I should say American jazz has traveled the world and come back and done that multiple times. And a way to look at this is, you know, we have melodies. Basically, one concept when we start learning how to do jazz is to take an existing melody and embellish that melody. So what I wanted to do was take a song that everybody knows and talk about it, and then kind of show how this would work with rhythms in different places from around the world to see how this works. So the melody that I chose was Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. We, for the most part, all know this song. If you don't know that song, I don't know what to tell you. It's the same melody that we use for the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. It's the exact same song. So that song was written in the 1780s by a composer by the name of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, which most of us have at least heard the name before. And so the music was written first. The lyrics came later. The lyrics were written in 1806, and they're based off a poem by Jane Taylor, and the poem is called The Star. So the music came first, the lyrics came later. So we know the words as the melody that we all know is Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, how I wonder what you are, up above the world so high, like a diamond. You get the point. So one way in which as jazz artists, what we can do to embellish a melody is we can basically play that melody. We could play it in a different meter or time. So what I just did was in 4/4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. We could perhaps change that to 3/4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. We could perhaps do it in 5/4. In lots of other countries, you know, in the United States, we always, the majority of the music we hear is in 4/4. But in other cultures, you know, it's not uncommon to do things in 5/4. That's very common in Greece. They do things in 5. So if we think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, up above the world so high. You can see how this is going. So what I want to do now is I'm going to play, and I tested this, so the sound should work out pretty well, but I'm going to play some different variations rhythmically of this melody, and how I sing the melody will be dependent on how I hear these rhythms. A big part of each part of the globe is not only harmony, but rhythms. And like if you look at like Latin America, you know, when we talk about Latin America or any part of the world, you know, they have these rhythms that are very important to them, almost to the point where if you play it incorrectly, you might find yourself in a fist fight. They hold it near and dear as part of their culture. Rhythm is very important. So So I'm going to start with American jazz, the beginnings of this, and I'm going to go to New Orleans. So this is a rhythm called second line. This comes out of, think of like a military parade, like John Philip Sousa. Dun, 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 dun. You have a march. You know, something very militaristic. So out of that grew, they shifted the emphasis from beat 1 and 3 to 2 and 4, and a march that's more of like festive or for partying in New Orleans is called a second line. So that's what this is. And this is a very old rhythm, but also sounds very modern. So I'm going to play it. The sound might cut off for a second, but it'll come back in. So here we go. Here's a second line from New Orleans, and this is kind of the birth of jazz. 1, 2, 3, 4. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. So how I sing that melody, it's still improvisation because I'm not singing it straight like the original version. I'm shifting the rhythms, and that becomes improvisation. We can build things off of that and tell stories based on how we embellish an idea and take that theme and develop it. So from there, we're going to go a little bit later in time to swing music, which was born out of second line. So swing music, everyone's heard it. At this point, it's old music because we've known it for about 100 years, but here's a different subtle shift in the rhythm. So this is what we call swing, a swing feel. And what we need to understand is a lot of these cultures had like drum circles, like one person would play another drum and another person, you'd have like 7 people playing a different drum, then they condense that down to one person playing a drum set. And so we hear these things now, and like you might have had like in a marching band, one person playing the bass drum, another person playing the snare drum, another person playing the cymbals. Now you have one person playing one thing on a drum set. So here's an example of the swing feel on drum set. 1, 2, 3, 4. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. So what I want to do, and I know we don't have a lot of time, is I want to go from as many different cultures as I can here. So I've got a bunch of things laid out. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to Cuba, and we're going to check out some of their rhythms. There's a lot, but I'm going to do like maybe 2 or 3 here. So here's a cha-cha. This is an example of a Cuban rhythm called the cha-cha. We'll put Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star on top of that. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. So that's an example of what we call cha-cha. And there are several variations. There's not one thing. You could have like 40, 50 different ways of playing a cha-cha depending on where you grew up and how they've interpreted it. Here is a beat called a mambo. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Let's do one more from Cuba here. Here is, oh, never mind. I'm going to switch. Let's go to Brazil. There's a lot in Brazil. So here's something called a bossa nova. Many of you have probably heard this already. Where's my notes here? There it is. All right, so let's check out, here's a bossa nova done with brushes. So a drummer that's playing brushes. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. So that's one version of a style of Brazilian music called bossa nova. Let's check out a samba. So this is a little bit faster. Also, we'll do this with brushes as well. Let's check this out. Sorry, that's not the one I wanted. Wait a minute. My mistake. Here we go. Here's brushes. A little bit more lively. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. So that's something we call samba. And again, there's many variations on that. Here's a bio, and this is, we'll check, this is another, and a lot of these are regional. It's from like the location where you're born. That's their rhythm, you know. This is called a biome. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Now, going back to jazz, I mean, there's a million ways to do this. I'm just taking a concept, like I said, just very simple, and just taking that melody, and how I phrase that melody will be different depending on how I'm hearing the time, those rhythms. So let's go to Argentina really quick, and we will check out a tango. Many of you have heard of a tango before. So this is a particular type of tango, and again, this is from Argentina. One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above, the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. So there you go. That's an example of a tango. Let's go to the Caribbean now. And here's something called soca. You hear this a lot in modern dance music, you know, hip hop and that kind of things. They actually steal, I don't want to say steal, but they use these things, these rhythms from all these cultures that are centuries old. And they're like, oh, it's brand new. No, it's very, very old. And a lot of times the modern drum things are watered down versions of the original. And that's why people get so pissed off about it. But let's check it out. Here is soca. Here it is. 1, 2, 3, 4. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above, the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. And so the point I want to get across is every culture around the world has its own rhythms, its own ways of looking at harmony and theory, and you can take this stuff and adapt it. And like I said, you might not speak the same language, but you can instantly communicate with sound, particularly if you have musicians that have studied music, because it is a language like anything else. Let's go, I'm going to go to a different program really quick to play you guys some other stuff. We're going to go to, let's go to Nigeria, and this is a beat called, well, it's called Afrobeat. This has become quite popular, you know, with funk bands here in the United States. But this is from Nigeria, and here's an example of Afrobeat. 1, 2, 3, 4. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above, the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. So that's and again, there's lots of variations on that, but when we hear that, we call that funk. We think of it as funk, but that's an old African rhythm, right? Let's take a look at something. You know, my father's from the Middle East, so I'm half Iraqi, and then my mom is Irish, German, English. So we listen to a lot of Middle Eastern music in our household growing up. So let's check out some music from there. So how about, here's something called a baladi. It's a Middle Eastern rhythm. And remember, this would be like a drum circle, like a lot of people, but this is condensed to one drum set. 1, 2, 3, 4. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above, the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. And let's check out one more. This will be the last one for today because I wanted to allow some time for questions if you guys had any. Here's another one from the, oh wait, there's two more. Sorry, two more because these are cool and I want you to hear them. This one's called a Maksum, also from the Middle East. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above, the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. And the last one I'll do for you guys today, this is from India, and this one's called Bhangra. And this is typically played on a dole, which is a two-sided drum. And I've done a few gigs where we played like Indian weddings where we'll take like pop music and put these types of beats on there. And it's very, very cool. And it sounds like stuff now it's 2020, we've heard all these things because it all is mixed together. Like I said, it's a living, breathing language. It had to start somewhere hundreds of years ago in these cultures, but it's an ongoing dialogue and it's constantly reborn like a phoenix, if you will. So here's Bangra. 1, 2, 3, 4. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above, the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. So that's kind of the unique thing about this. We have notes, we have rhythms. In Western European harmony, we have 12 notes, or we call half tones. And then in other cultures, they have smaller notes than that, microtones. So when you listen to the music of the Middle East or Armenia or India or things like that, you hear it sounds different, and there's a reason why. And we don't have enough time to get into all this, but I just wanted to kind of talk to you about, you know, my history here in Tacoma, the jazz history of Tacoma, what jazz is, and there's a lot, but that's just a little tiny bit of how we take a melody and we embellish it and grow and flesh it out from there, and then let you hear some different rhythms from around the world and how we would apply these concepts. So does anybody have any questions for me at this time?
Yep, we have a couple of questions, and we're just a little bit over, but I'm sure people are interested.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's fascinating. So we'll leave time for Claire to also answer some questions. But so some of the questions for you, Kareem, are there any plans to try and resurrect the Pack Avenue Jazz District? Did it have a name? Mixed-use buildings with clubs, shops, galleries, eateries, and affordable artist housing would be amazing.
Yeah. Well, I think right now with this whole quarantining and sheltering in place, who knows? There's a lot of places, you know, venues that are not going to survive this. Some will and some will not. There's been a large amount of damage that's been done. You know, I think everybody would love to have it. The problem is always economics and financial viability to make these things run, whether it's an art house or a large venue or a strip of venues. You know, I think it's different now because jazz is not the popular music of the day like it was, you know, in the 1920s and 30s. I of course would love to see that happen, but I don't know. I mean, I'm constantly working with different venues to try and bring and make them up and running and viable music houses, but it's a challenge to be sure. So I don't know. I don't have an answer to that other than we'll keep trying and we're not going to give up the fight. So.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Kareem. The next question is, what is your favorite Tacoma jazz venue? And that's from Mark.
Favorite Tacoma jazz venue. There isn't one right now. I mean, there's lots of places that have a hodgepodge of music. And so venues that I'd like to perform, like I'm always working on, you know, presenting jazz artists from out of town, working with my band, or when we have visiting artists, places that I like to present in Tacoma. I like the Swiss. We've had some lovely projects at Alma Mater, not on the main stage, but in the restaurant area and over in Honey. I like McMinimans. I like the space there and I like the stage there. You know, Jazz Bones can be cool. I mean, there's a lot of politics involved in a lot of these things, and there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that people don't see. So there are a lot of great rooms, but there are a lot of other factors that can work against making it good for musicians. So, but those are, I've had some lovely, my favorite room right now currently in this city limits of Tacoma to perform and work with the management is the Swiss.
Great. Thank you for that. We have two more questions that I have here. So clearly your presentation really has resonated with people. And I was just thinking, this is Bev, by the way, this would be a wonderful program in and of itself. So maybe we can talk later about continuing that.
Sure.
But the two questions that we have remaining are just curious. And this is from Han. And again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. But just curious, the Japanese seem very appreciative of jazz. Do you have any commentary about that?
Yeah, well, we just did an exchange with Kitakyushu this last year for the 60th anniversary. So we raised the majority of the funds to go to Japan, and we paid for the American artists and the Japanese artists. And so we spent about almost 2 weeks. We were in Tokyo for a good chunk of time, and then Kitakyushu. And all of the concerts that we presented were free for the public to attend, and also like some of the workshops and educational things were free. And they were very, very, very appreciative. The audience loved it. It seems, and this is not a jab at the United States at all. I'm a citizen. I was born here. My father was a foreigner, first generation. So, I mean, I have another perspective than a lot of my friends that are generations here. But it seems like when you go to Europe and Asia and Japan, and the appreciation for the music is greater. And I'm not saying that people don't appreciate it here. They do, but it seems like in these other countries that have been around for centuries, you know, the United States is relatively a young country in comparison. And these other cultures seem to have a much more deep-seated appreciation for art and art forms, and they don't look at it just like popular music. They look at it as an art form. And this is a massive topic of conversation, but I think my time in Japan, not only going there and working with the musicians there, but bringing the musicians here, there seems to be a very strong, deep-seated appreciation, which is nice. It's nice.
Great. Thank you, Kareem. And then the last question is, you mentioned that American, and this is from Donald, you mentioned that American jazz has been adopted and adapted around the world. Are there examples of jazz-like improvisation that did not have its origins in Western and African traditions?
Of course, definitely. I think some people will take, and again, you know, we talk about, as Americans, we talk about, well, this is our thing. And for a large part of it, you know, African-American music blending or African-American rhythms with Western European harmony. Yes, that's our thing, Louis Armstrong, and that it is a Black, you know, African-American art form, when you can't deny that. But the idea of improvisation starting there, no. I mean, these other countries, like I said, Beethoven and Mozart, they improvised. They didn't have the swing thing that was developed out of African-American rhythms, but they were improvising. Like I said, you know, people in the Middle East, they have a long, long tradition of improvising. So with that in mind, they might take the spirit of jazz, or like maybe what we call jazz standards, you know, like something by George Gershwin or Jerome Kern or Cole Porter, and take a framework of a song like that and put it and change it and have like their harmony that might include, you know, microtones. I mean, it's massive. Like I said, it's language. And of course, you might have a style of, like, here we have, like, for lack of a better term, we have like Ebonics, or you know, they may take that to another country and then put their own spin on that. So an example off the top of my head, I don't really have one, you know, because I'm on the spot here, but I know that there are groups and bands that are really focusing on like the folk music. They've done projects where they take their folk music and they adapt it and improvise on it like we would with American jazz.
Great. And we actually have one question, and this will be the last question so that Claire can, what is the musical term for wrapping it up, bringing it home?
There are many. Wrapping it up works well.
But Carrie asks, Tacoma is an early city. Many people don't stay out late compared to other cities. What impact does this have on the traditional live music scene? How do you work around it?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, it's not like New York. It's not unheard of New York for sometimes. There'll be some clubs where music is going around the clock 24 hours. You have to work with what you have. I mean, that's the best answer I can give. I mean, if I had the solution to all these problems, I would be making a lot more as a self-employed jazz musician than I am right now. You know, that's what everyone's always trying to figure that out. You know, I served on the Arts Commission for 3 years, and the conundrum was always, how do we get more people in attendance? And it's like, well, let's try a Sunday brunch thing, and which we've done, or let's try an earlier evening thing. It all depends, and there's not like one demographic for it. You kind of have to market to all of the different age ranges. There's no way to, I mean, you just have to keep trying and seeing what works. You know, even with like live streams, a lot of us are converting to live streams, finding the right day and the right time. That's a challenge as well. So I wish I had a better answer. I don't, but like I said, I'm not going to quit this ever till I drop dead. So I'm always going to be working on it and trying to find a way to improve it and make it accessible to everybody, and something that'll work time frame wise for everyone as well.
Great. So that's all the questions we have. Thank you, Kareem, for your time and your really extensive knowledge and sharing that with us. And I'm going to turn it back over to Claire. And would you mind if we were thinking of sending out a resource packet afterwards, and if people had questions, Kareem, would you be willing to answer questions via email?
I'm happy to, yeah, of course.
Okay,
And thank you
great.
for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, it's been wonderful, and thank you. And it's such a unique perspective on origin stories. And I will turn it back over to Claire now.
Great, Beverly. And I have one more question for Kareem. Are you there?
Yeah,
So,
I'm here.
Kareem, what do you think about the possibility of maybe bringing some young people who like the idea of jazz from our sister cities into doing a concert together?
I think it's a great idea. I'm all for it. Again, you know, like everything else, it's always a matter of timing and finance and the rest of that.
Time and financing.
Yeah, one of the big things, one of the easy ones is, you know, we worked with Tacoma Community College because they have an exchange program. So whenever they have students that are coming from a sister cities to Tacoma, our organization, Kareem Candy World Orchestra, works on providing them. We give them scholarships so they can attend our classes for free, and we provide them with instruments and the opportunities to perform out in public with professional musicians. So it's in place. It's just getting the word out. I mean, right now, obviously, with all of the COVID-19 stuff, that's put a damper on things. But I mean, we're constantly working on establishing and cultivating those relationships so the students can come here and learn and realize, hey, Americans aren't the jerks that we see on TV, you know.
Well, if anybody who's listening has any ideas for financing a fabulous program like that, just let us know. That would be really great. I want to say thank you to you, Kareem, to all of our storytellers today. It's been wonderful to have you here. Next week, for those of you who are listening, bring back your friends and family. Next week, we're going to hear stories from Cuba. We're going to hear stories from Mexico. So any folks out there who speak Spanish, this is going to be your day, because definitely the Cuban one is going to be in Spanish, and maybe we'll get a little Spanish on the Mexican story. We'll have a story from the Philippines, a story from Taiwan, and what I am so thrilled about is that our beloved elder, Connie McLeod from the Puyallup tribe, is going to tell us the origin story of this area that we call home, from that perspective of the Puyallup tribe. So that's going to be a really special opportunity for us all. If we have time next week, I might even do how to tell your own origin story. So we'll see about that. But today I want to thank each of you so much, and truly, deeply, my deep appreciation to Tacoma Creates, who makes this happen, to the city of Tacoma for creating Tacoma Creates, to the people of Tacoma who voted that in, to the Tacoma Public Library, and especially to the artists who told their stories, and to Beverly Chilko Devlin, John Hargis, Simon Bowman, our practical and technical partners. We just couldn't have done it without you. And to our audience, thank you so much for coming. Come back again next Saturday. To our origins. Cheers.
Great. Thank you. We did have two more questions. Mark wanted to know what was the name of Kareem's organization.
Yeah, so the nonprofit that I run that does a lot throughout the year, we do classes and performances in these exchanges. It's called the Kareem Candy World Orchestra.
Thank you, Kareem. And just Joan James finishes up with, this was an amazing series of origin stories. Thank you. Thanks for your organization, and I look forward to the next session. So thank you, everyone. We hope you have a great weekend. And Claire, any final words?
Just deep thanks to everyone.
Great.
We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks so much.